So,
Get yourself
honestly,
Mhm.
as we keep hearing about these platforms acquiring studios, every time it happens, I'm just like, why? Like, why?
yeah, why?
Why are they doing this? Because they don't need to own a game studio to profit off of that game studio. They can just let that studio take on all the risk and take on all the costs, and they can just shave 30% off the top of everything that studio does. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 535 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth, and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Matt, I'm the miscellaneous programmer.
I'm Sam, and I'm the artiste.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today's August 20th, 2020 vibes. And before we get started, we have a warning. There's going to be profanity in this show, so be ready for that. We'd also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you so much for your monthly donations to help keep the podcast going. And we have a donation with a message from Drainyard, who says...
Rainyard?
Drainyard, who says, "Hi, B-Scotch guys." Drain.
Sorry.
Drain.
Okay, drain. It is drain.
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure I heard it properly.
Hi, B-Scotch guys. I'm here from the recent past listening to you guys talking about your SaaS ventures, software as a service. And I have a humble naming suggestion, Sasquatch, as in Sasquatch. Love the podcast and your in-depth discussions about the less flashy parts of game dev. It's really valuable. So we actually do have a tentative name for the service.
We have a real
It's
name.
not as good. It's
not as good.
Sasquatch. Not even close to as good.
I feel like Sasquatch would be good if you're making a service that is for software as a services.
Yeah.
You know, a SaaS.
If we want
Sasquatch.
one meta level higher, then Sasquatch trademark it. We'll just bring that right to the bank. That's
That's good.
stellar suggestion.
Do we want to say what the actual name is?
Yeah, sure, because we can also get feedback on it. So, as a reminder, you can check out our Discord, hop into the podcast channel, and you can just tell us stuff that you think about the podcast. So that's a great place for feedback. So we're calling it drum roll. Style. What's his face?
Yep.
Yep. Slow drum roll. We're calling it Ludo Kit.
Yes.
Which is, it hits basically a bunch of marks. Fun to say. So we got that going for us. A little vague, so that's great.
Is that
We
Latin?
don't want to be
Ludo?
too specific.
No.
Ludo
Ludo's
is,
game.
let's call it Latin. Yeah,
Call that.
I think that's
some language, that's for sure.
correct. So Ludo means play, and you'll hear it in all kinds of pretentious contexts and video game stuff. People will be like, "Ooh, the Ludo narrative dissonance of this, blah, blah, whatever." And so so it's a word that some people do have associated that video game sort of.
And it's what we refer to as verbaceous, which is that it feels like a verb if you say it right. You could say ludokit. You're like, well, okay, just go ludokit. I don't know.
Yeah.
Go you turn it into a verb, which is just kind of
Verbaceous.
Yeah, it sounds like Sudoku, so people familiar with saying kind of that sequence of consonants, and ludokit.com was available, which is one of those, like if you can get a name that's got a .com domain, and I did a trademark search, and remarkably, despite the fact, so Ludo is present in like a million trademarks. Of various sorts. Kit, obviously, because those are even more generic, right? But Ludo Kit, nope.
Clap 'em together,
There's
baby.
not even a dead one called Ludo Kit. So we're like
Never
clear
before
trademark-wise,
have these
never
letters
before.
been put together.
which to me is
innovation.
truly remarkable.
That is pretty wild.
So it kind of hits all those things, and because the idea of this, so we talked about this in the past, the idea of this software as a service project is to say we got all these tools to help us make games and sell games, and we've been making them for ourselves, and so they're very internally focused. But it would be cool if we could make those available to other people. But to do that in a way that's worth the investment on our side, we don't want to get paid for it. So if we put it together as a really good, fully packaged kind of a service that we can add features to over time, then we can basically make our own experiences with that stuff better, so it's not janky like hacking commands into a console. But then
Which
also
is how
make
we
that
currently
available to-
roll.
Which is how we currently do most of it. And so it'll just be a much better kind of a service. But that does mean that it's not, there's not a succinct, like, this is what it is, in terms of.
Yeah, it works better
Coming
to
up
be a
with a
little bit vague about it, because that way, if it's like, oh yeah, there's an achievement manager for Steam, but also some patch notes manager thing and all these other things. It's just, you need enough of vagueness about this being games pipeliney related from start to finish. So seems like it works.
Yeah, because it's just a variety of stuff. So we got
that's
it.
what
Got
we're
the
going with.
domain, and now I can go back through. I've been calling it Butterscotch Game Service internally, or Game Center, and all of the documentation I'm writing as I'm working on it, the service. Which so now I can start going back through and being like, okay, now I can use a name for this stupid thing. It'll be so much nicer.
Yeah, the
Still need
longer
to
you
look at this stuff,
go, the longer you go without a name for a thing, the more annoying it is to kind of have to go back and change it all and all the documentation. But we're there now.
though.
So we're good.
As people
Right.
who've dug into Levelhead will tell you, if you dig deep, a little bit deep, it's called a platformer builder. Is like under the hood, what it's called. Right? So it's save folder is called platformer builder and that kind of stuff. Which
Yeah,
is,
I think it got its name like 3 months into dev because it was just
by
a
then it was too
platformer builder, and we didn't know what the theme of the game was. So and we're just leave it alone. Behind the scenes, it's platformer builder. That's fine. So let's talk about the fact that we're on video.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's this? What the heck happened? I look like I'm in a sauna.
Sam
you do look like you're in a zone.
is in a sauna, and that's pretty cool.
You should
so
get a smoke
actually,
effect going
it's
so it
pretty
looks
hot.
like you're in a steam.
Pretty nice. Oh yeah, you need like a little mister in here.
Yeah, Sam's in a
Also,
closet that has like cedar paneling or something, which I think
It's like a clothes closet that I had my clothes in, but I don't really wear those clothes. So I was like, fuck these clothes. I'm gonna sit in this sauna and go for it. So here we are in my little sauna box.
So last episode we got a question from I think Kevin asking about statistics for the podcast, and it was interesting listening back through because like you could hear the gears turning as we were kind of talking through the different statistics, and basically it's that like the podcast hasn't really had any growth, but also we've done literally nothing to make it grow, right? So we talked through it on that episode, and then we continued talking through it after the fact. And first, we just did some basic experiments. Like on YouTube, we just gave an episode a thumbnail that was unique for that episode, and we changed the title so that the title was less kind of like a pithy joke and more descriptive, so that if people were searching for something, then the episode would come up because then the title is kind of related to the content. And that paid off because that episode had like a 50 or 60% uptick relative to the other recent episodes in traffic.
We didn't even do all that stuff until the episode had been out for like 8 hours or something. So
yeah, we just changed it, and then suddenly it's just like boop, and it just popped up.
yeah, there was this kind of weird serendipitous timing, which is we're kind of talking about this amongst ourselves earlier, that like every podcast I listen to in the past like 6 months has transitioned to being YouTube or / video first, because sometimes on Spotify. Because Spotify also I think did a big push recently to be like all in on video podcasts and stuff. And so one of them I was listening to, which is Shop Talk Show, it's a web dev podcast. They were talking about it like literally the same week that we were talking about this, and they were talking about like their troubles they were having, like trying to figure out how to navigate that, and then they just kind of mentioned as part of it this YouTuber who talks about trying to make your channel perform better, and I can't remember what her name is, but probably get some links in the show notes. But she had just like these two really nice, like 20 or 30 minute videos about like thumbnails and titles. And as we're going through them, we're like, oh, yeah, okay, nope, yep, this all tracks as good ideas and stuff we are not doing. But also, remarkably, it's the same set of problems that we have trying to get people to see our games on Steam or elsewhere, And so we're like, okay, actually, this is all just part of the same problem. We should be treating kind of everything in this.
Well, we figured it's like you get all these micro experiments then on our side then to try out how we would thumbnail a thing or title a thing or whatever else in the context of just like a weekly podcast episode. Then gives us like a bunch of kind of experience and ammo, when it comes to then bothering with the more important ones like the Steam slugs and stuff like that, right? Yeah. Because like it's all the same. At the end of the day, it's all the same stuff. It's just attention economy things, right?
Yeah.
And while the rules may differ, or like the aspect ratios may differ, like platform to platform, the reality is that the core psychology of a viewer does not. And so we were like, oh, you know what? Let's sit down and try this stuff out. And we happen to also, make How Many Dudes for the GMTK Game Jam. And so in the week following that was when we were talking about the stuff, reading about thumbnails, everything. And so we did some work on those thumbnails on like itch and whatever else, and saw the same thing, which is like, oh yeah, well, which again, it's dumb because it's like, yes, of course, if you put slightly more energy intelligently into the presentation of a thing, then people pick up on it.
People look at it.
But
yeah, and if you're not familiar with How Many Dudes, if you haven't been listening to the podcast, if all this stuff works and you're like, hey, I've never even seen this before, but it showed up on YouTube, and I clicked it because the thumbnail was interesting or whatever. So if you find yourself here, so as Sam said, we made a game called for the GMTK, which is Game Maker's Toolkit game jam called How Many Dudes. You can go to howmanydudes.com. Speaking of domains that were surprisingly available, go to howmanydudes.com and you can just play it right in the web. The version that we made for the GMTK, because we're working on or thinking about making it into a full-fledged real game, which will probably differ significantly. But unless that's something you guys wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
the interesting thing was the response that we got to that was, so after the jam, we made a bunch of these web builds. We talked about this in the previous episodes too, but we put those web builds up, and since putting those up, we basically had we had a really good response to it from the jam. So the game ended up placing, I think like 19th or 17th or something like that overall, and like overall enjoyment. And then there's a little bit of
out
it
of like 10,000.
Yeah, out of like 10,000 games. And then there's like a little tiny slice of it in Mark Brown, who runs the GMTK's channel. Like a little slice of it in the intro video of his like picking the best games, basically. So we didn't make it into that.
And he doesn't mention its name. He doesn't say it's one of the best games. So while he's talking about the idea of the best games, there's like a 2-second slice. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll take it. Feather in the cap. So we saw though that through all those builds we put online, so on itch, on Opera GX.games, that the game just kind of works for people, and Scott, you guys
it's cruising. Yeah, so we have it on. It's on itch and GX.games, which a lot of people I think probably don't really know about GX.games.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that's put together by Opera, and like they're using it to kind of like push people over to their Opera GX browser. But GX.games is basically itch. It's just like a place where there's web games that you can play. And GameMaker can export to the GX format, which is a WASM, WebAssembly, something.
Mm-hmm. Yep, assembly. Yep.
And so we exported it to a web build and put it onto GX.games and onto itch. And itch has like 1 million games. And that, I'm not saying that as an exaggeration. It has over 1 million games. And so getting traffic and discovery on itch is really, really hard unless you actually kind of like reach out to the people who run itch and like try to get some kind of featuring, which is, that's how pretty much every platform works, right?
Awesome.
So, but because GameMaker is owned by Opera, then like we know people at Opera, right? And so we submitted, or we uploaded How Many Dudes to GX.games, and we just sent a message to some people, and we're like, hey, we made this game. If you guys have any like open feature spots, we'd be happy to take them.
Yeah.
And GX.games only has 11,000 games. So the feature spots are not really competitive.
Child's play.
Yeah. And so they were just like
0 games.
Yeah. So they're like, sure, we got an opening. So they just threw How Many Dudes at the top of the page for the first like 5 or 6 days. And then since then, it's just been kind of churning through their, different like recommendation algorithms and stuff like that. And on GX.games, How Many Dudes has gotten over 50,000 plays, accumulating 2.5 years of playtime in 2 weeks. And it's now in the top 5 spots on their top games section. So the average session length is pretty long, even though it's just a jam game that just kind of like runs out of steam. So people are playing it for like 40 to 60 minutes. And so
they basically play the whole thing, right?
They play it until it runs out. And actually we have like a lot of returning players. It's like 50% are returning players, like people who play it 1 week and then they come back the next week and keep playing it. And so we're just getting so many positive signals about it. And we're just, and also the concept is simple enough, but it can have a lot of depth added into it, and it can expand in a lot of ways. Like there's so much potential in the formula for this game. And so we're going to make it. We're going to make How Many Dudes as our next game. And then just as a test, we also set up a Steam page for it. So we set that up, you have to submit to Steam to get approved.
Yeah,
so
we got it all. It was all up and running the week following the jam.
Yeah.
right? Because we'd already seen such positive results that we were like, well, let's just put a Steam store page up and
it's
see
been up
what
for
happens.
a week and a half or something.
2 weeks?
Maybe?
I don't know. I don't know what time it is. It's been 2-ish weeks, I think.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So we didn't make any big announcements. We didn't.
Mhm.
We didn't like broadcast anything through our newsletter. We didn't do anything to like
Did we
try
even
to
post
try
it
to
in Discord?
broadcast it.
Did we put it anywhere?
Somebody found the Steam page and they were like, "Wait, how do we use the Steam page?" And I just replied, "I was like, yep." But that was
Yeah,
it,
right,
right?
yeah.
Because we're
Say, 'cause
purposely,
we have,
we're
like, we have
purposely
a
not
Discord.
announcing it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we're not pushing it currently.
Yeah,
but
we wanna
Yeah,
use
and the idea
angst.
is it's not. It's still like it's in its jam game form, right? So it's the seed of whatever the future game is going to be, and we still want when people see it and decide like, do I care about this? We want it to put its best foot forward, you know. So we don't think it's there yet, but we're like, we might as well have the placeholder there so that if people just happen to stumble into it, right, then they can make that decision early. Given that, at least in the context of something like Opera GX or I guess GX.games or Itch, that when people see it in that context, they're like, hell yeah, I like this here, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Yeah.
And collecting
So-
wishes in the background.
Yeah, so we're directing people to the Steam page from the web builds. Like once people get far enough into the web build, there's just a little kind of a note in the bottom right corner that's just like, "Hey, do you want to see?" I think it's like, "Do you want to see how many dudes it takes to defeat 100 duck-sized horses?" Which is that that meme about would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? Which I think we need to have those in the final game.
We definitely.
it has to be absolutely.
Yeah. So we then have a little link there that directs people over to the Steam page. And what we found is that like Steam is not showing the game to anybody. Steam is not directing any traffic to the game at all. All the traffic is external. So there's all these hilariously weird stats now, which is like the click-through rate from impressions on Steam is like 130% because we are sending more traffic to the page than Steam is, right? In terms of impressions.
Yeah, because click through is basically number of people who go to the store page versus how many people see it elsewhere in the store, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I think it's one of these reminders too that almost all stats you see out in the world for analytics and stuff they're dumb as shit. They're so simple, right?
Yeah,
It's not that they like tracked you as a specific user and were like, did you specifically visit it and then click, right? It's they just looked at how many people saw it and how many people ended up on the store page. And then they called that ratio the click-through rate.
Click-through rate, which of course is not really what's happening, right? It's because a click-through rate cannot be over 100%. That's not how clicking on things works.
Unless you just one of those people who just clicks real fast all the time. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You're just double clicking on shit.
Double click-through rate.
Actually,
I guess that would actually wouldn't that
enough.
have it? Wouldn't that go the other way? So if you click twice, but then you only arrive once.
Well, it depends. If it's tracking clicks specifically instead of visits, then that would work. So if it's like how many times does this get clicked on? If people are just like double click, maybe actually only boomers are seeing it and they're all double clicking it.
That's true. They might be doing that.
And
Yep.
and it actually is measuring real clicks rather than like store page visits. That's
They
so
love,
maybe
they
this
love
is-
the double click.
Yep.
Yeah, boomers love how many dudes. So I guess it's just we just hit that market perfectly somehow.
Yeah. So this is kind of like a soft announcement, I guess, through the podcast that we're going to be making How Many Dudes as our next game after Crashlands 2. And so we had talked about making smaller games on a faster turnaround. And so we do plan on having this game out on like a pretty short timeline, actually. But we'll have more info because we're still currently working on Crashlands 2 on up to 1.3. And so we'll have more info as we actually get into full development on How Many Dudes. But
It'll be a minute
just
before
know it's coming.
we're fully on that. So
Well, and ideally, the way that this should all work in the ideal case, right, is that we can decouple making a game from trying to get it sold, right? And so this is especially true for making smaller games more frequently, because ideally we can get the game made, get into a good spot, feel really good about it, and so it's ready to go, and then we can figure out like, okay, given how Steam works, given our various marketing opportunities, given whatever events we want to submit to, like all that kind of stuff, what is the best timing to actually release it, and what is the sequence of steps that look like leading up to that? Because if we start working on the next game after that without having launched this one, that's fine, you know.
Yep.
We just got to find the best time to get it out the door.
Yeah. And this is kind of signals a phase shift for us into a new way of thinking about about developing and marketing games because like Crashlands 2 was nearly like a 5-year dev cycle. And in that amount of time, if you're only launching one game in 5 years, then you're just not getting any practice and you're not getting any real good feedback about how to market stuff and how to design your games in a marketable way and all of that. And so we realized like we need to have much faster turnaround times and just make more games and learn how to make games that have a strong hook. And it seems like How Many Dudes has that. And one of the more interesting things about putting together the Steam page for How Many Dudes is we needed to put together a trailer. And in the past, whenever we put together trailers for our games, it's always felt like we needed to explain a lot in the trailer.
Or just like show a lot. Like
show a lot of things to kind of like convince people like, look, there's a lot of stuff in this game. And that's basically kind of the selling point of pretty much any big game that we've made, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, as we talked about in past episodes, they didn't have a succinct hook. Like for all of them, the sort of thing about them was like, these are really good. Like that's kind of their thing.
Yeah.
They did everything really well. Come experience all of the things in here and be like, ooh, this is all really good, right?
Right.
Because that's true, but that's not a selling point. And we could never come up with like, oh yeah, we just have to get this one message, this one one-liner, this one whatever across, and that'll bring people in. And yeah, with How Many Dudes, that was a different kind of experience.
So literally the trailer for How Many Dudes is just was it 15 seconds long or something like that? We we were trying to explain more and more of it in our kind of like our old trailer style, and we just kept being like, this is too much. Like we don't need to say that much. We just need to show what this game is, and people will just get it.
It opens with just the choice between fighting toddlers or I remember the other one was fighting
like 85 toddlers or 2 gorillas, and then. Yeah, then I think Stam has a voiceover of just like 85 toddlers. I mean, that's just free money. And then he clicks on fight, and then we just see the dudes fight toddlers, just blasting toddlers, and then the title screen shows up. That's it. That's all you need because it's like, oh, okay, I get what this game is.
Yep.
Well, that was the same deal with like the thumbnails and stuff too. It was like once we watched those videos I mentioned earlier, and we like so we're also replacing our thumbnails for How Many Dudes, right? Yeah, that's part of that process too. Is like if you just have somebody punching a toddler, like punching a baby, like as the instantly understandable, instantly compelling.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, it's turbo cartoony, so it's like it's got that extra layer of comedy where you basically get away with the the cartoonish like hyper violence in a way that you can't. I mean, it's not like advocating for punching real toddlers. You know what I mean? Like it's the comedy is very present because of how toonish the whole thing is. And so it's just like
Sam earlier was like, should we be pitching this to Apple Arcade? And I was like,
no,
I don't think they're gonna go for it.
I still kind of want to try and just see.
We can pitch them. We can pitch them. We'll be like, okay, we'll make a version for Apple Arcade where instead of blood, candy. I want to say like
there already is. We already made that
out.
Toggle. There's already a confetti toggle which swaps the blood splatters over to confetti.
We just won't have the option to turn it into blood on Apple Arcade.
Yeah,
it's mainly you gotta change it from punching babies. Probably you got to swap out the babies, which I don't know what you do.
You can make them baby aliens because you're allowed to punch baby aliens.
That's true. How many baby aliens?
Small aliens.
They're not babies.
Small adult aliens.
That's true.
They're just little adult alien guys.
Yeah.
Give them some angry eyes, and then everything's okay. They're coming for you. You know?
Make them evil.
A couple of fangs,
Still keep the diapers, though, because
100%.
They can't work. Their digestive systems don't work well in our environment, so they got to dipe up.
All that extra gravity really
I think
pushes stuff out.
But
I think diapers make something just increasingly worse the more not a human baby it is. Like the further you depart from a human baby, and if it's got a diaper on, you're like, nope, this is getting really uncomfortable.
Maybe you just have a lot of questions. Why is that?
And the first one is, how far can I punch this thing?
That's the best question to be asked.
Honestly, though, I think maybe not though, because like if a diaper's on something that's not a baby, then you just feel bad. Like if you see a diaper on a dog, you're like, oh man,
poor dog.
That's sad. So maybe we gotta undo the dipes. But well.
Yep.
So there might be a way to get this game on Apple Arcade, but it is, dare I say, a somewhat violent game. So
It is all about
it's
just how many dudes it takes to punch stuff.
to just beat the hell out of
Yeah.
stuff.
So yeah, we'll see.
So it's a tough pitch, but we'll see. All right, you guys want to get into some questions?
Yeah, let's go.
Or
So these questions come from our listeners over at podcast.bscotch.net. So if anybody would like to get their questions onto a future episode, you could just head on over there, ask questions. You can also leave comments there if you want, which, we can address those as well. And people can upvote questions, so we try to kind of go into the order that the community wants to hear us answer stuff. So the highest upvoted question, which is kind of an old one, comes from Lex Zap. So this is like a 6-month-old question. It's been kind of lurking, just below the top spot for a while. While I would never listen to any other gaming podcast, a friend of mine heard on a podcast that Sony canceled 9 live service games since 2023, totaling in billions of losses, and that chasing Fortnite may have single-handedly brought on the calamity that is the 2025 gaming industry. What is your take on these statements?
Even though this is 6 months old, I mean, honestly, it's a good,
Still
very relevant. Holds up. So,
evergreen.
yeah, I think, the take on that is, I would say, from our vantage point in the indie space, right? What we typically have access to in terms of like how we understand other indies moving in the space, or how we understand the platforms moving in the space, is it's largely around like smaller scoped games and stuff like that. What we've seen is like in the last 2 years or so is a big contraction in how much the platforms themselves are interested in paying a lot of money for any given, but frankly, like just any given game, before it's already sort of proven itself somehow.
I would actually argue that we're having a return to pre-COVID, because before COVID, it was pretty tough to get funding for games. Like, it was pretty competitive. And then suddenly, once everybody was locked in their houses and playing shit tons of video games, the money was just free flowing. Everybody was like, it's going to be like this forever for some reason.
I think pre-COVID, it was the mobile space there was more money in. And then the very beginning of COVID, that kind of stayed true. And it might have boosted a little bit too, especially with like Netflix entering and stuff. And we're definitely seeing an enormous on the mobile side, an enormous contraction back to, I would say, pre-pandemic kinds of levels. And I think consoles have been like up and down through the whole time that we've been doing this, where like when we first started, it was like impossible to get an indie game onto consoles. But then, like, year over year, they would have their indie program, and then it was like somebody who cared, there would like try to make that work, and they're trying to figure out how to have the store actually be. I don't know if you guys remember, even when we were working with Xbox to get original Crashlands on there, or at least talking to them about it a long time ago. They had like a whole section of the store that was like indie stuff, right? They were like really trying to do that, and maybe they still do today, but I don't think they do.
I think all the programs do but it's like, it's not, all the indie programs are not as front focused as they were like in the late 20 teens, And I think the big thing that's happened then with all of the larger entities then chasing after essentially like live service golden gooses, because everyone's like, we want to be the next Fortnite, because then we have infinite money, forever.
Yeah, that's exactly when people see that it's possible to make $1 billion a year, then that's especially people who are, business types. The only thing they can see is the dollar signs, and they don't ask any questions about like, is that a one-off? Is it possible to do that?
Can you even be the next Fortnite or whatever else? And the answer generally is no. You cannot unseat one of these things once they've like really taken.
There is no next. Like in the same way, there's no next to World of Warcraft.
Yeah, I feel like World of Warcraft is a perfect example of this, where you saw like a similar thing where everyone's chasing this big like MMO hype, and every single time it was like, it's going to be a WoW killer, it's going to like unseat the game. It just doesn't, because the reality is like you're playing you're not on home turf. Like you're playing against someone who has a massively established graph network of players who are already entrenched in this whole thing, whether it's through all the stuff they bought, right, in the case of like now Fortnite or whatever else, or just all the progress they made, all the friends they have. It's basically impossible to unseat these things. And so,
because people get entrenched into a social environment.
Exactly.
It's a hobby. It's where your friends are. It's what you do in your off time. And it's like there's been a bunch of times where like even like the only time I've seen something kind of unseat people out of WoW is Classic WoW,
Yeah.
where like Classic WoW
Things
launched.
cannibalize themselves, right? But that's
Yeah,
it, right?
but the thing is, like Classic WoW launched, and a lot of people from my guild then like went to go play Classic, and they, so like we lost a bunch of people from the roster, but they were back in like 3 months.
Yeah.
And so, because they were like, I miss playing with my friends, So,
Yep. And so that's basically that's the tricky
yeah,
part with all these large like social network games, right? Is that the reality is you can't actually take people from them. You have to create something that is just a different thing. And I think the big issue there, and the big issue in the AAA space, is this idea that you have to do that with $1 billion, right? It's like they don't look at stuff like if you look at Peak, for example, or even like Helldivers, which did took like Helldivers 2 took I think like 7 years in dev, did take a lot of money to make. But in terms of like the intention of it was not, they weren't like this is a Fortnite killer or like you know what I mean. It's its own thing. It has to be its own thing. Otherwise, there's no way it can create its own little pocket where you get to like own that space. And so I think really what you're seeing is just the fact that as more money gets poured into these projects, the need for them to be understandable to like an exec, right? As oh, Overwatch is good. We're making a thing better than Overwatch. Therefore, we're gonna take all the stuff. Or it's like you have to mitigate apparent risk when you're talking to these studio heads and platform holders and stuff like that to get this money. But in the process of doing so, as your money target goes up, you kind of have to play boilerplate design that's already been tread. Otherwise, people are like, too risky. I don't know. I don't get it. And then
Which is the funny thing, right? Because it isn't less risky to
no,
follow a trend, right? But business people see it as less risky. So
it's
as
more
a
understandable.
game,
I think.
Because things are
challenges.
understandable
Yes.
because conceptually, like, there's no way to guess what the risk is for a specific game, right? Doesn't even make sense. And so people fall back on basically familiarity. Like, well, does it look like something that's been really successful? Then if so, hey, that seems low risk. It's the same idea as sequels and their stuff, right?
Well, then you get
that means
stuff
that people
like
making your games and trying to like pitch them to these entities basically have to say like, okay, well, we have to. That's the kind of stuff we have to make because that's what can get funded, right?
right, and then but you have this thing where it's like Marvel Rivals is a good counterexample to this, right? Where it was a new live service game that came out, but importantly, it's like it's differentiated enough from the other stuff, right? And that's basically the question that people are always trying to ask is like, is it differentiated enough? And you don't know until after it launches. And so the problem is if you have to invest like $1 bajillion to be able to get it to a point where you can launch it and see what happens, then you're kind of you're just like, this is a rough spot. It's hard for these things to like truly make a dent, against all of these other social graph aspects of these games that have been in existence for like 12, 15 years now, whatever else. Like
something
it's just
else I
impossible.
wonder, something else I wonder about is I've been reading a lot about just like trends in terms of how people are spending their time. Because one of the biggest, basically what we compete for as a game studio is people's time. So if everybody's watching Netflix all day, every day, they're not playing video games because they're watching Netflix, right? Or TikTok or whatever else.
Or just scroll on Instagram or whatever.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you can only do one thing at a time. And as people's time gets eaten up by non-game stuff, the amount of available time left over for gaming goes down. And what we've kind of seen is, especially with the younger cohort, is TikTok is just devouring their days.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so there's also just like, even though there's new people like kind of aging into like being an audience for future games, they're just not putting as much time into gaming as like a previous generation did on a per person basis.
Well, and the younger ones are only playing Roblox.
Yeah, they just play Roblox. Yeah, yeah, Roblox.
Because when we grew up, it was like we had console generations that we cared about, right? And you would be like the new Nintendo platform would come out. You'd figure out what games are available on it. You'd save up your allowance money, Like in our case, we'd like make our big trip to Des Moines, Iowa, because we lived in a smaller town than that. Drive 40 minutes to go to Comp USA to like spend all of our carefully saved money on a tiny number of games, you know, and then bring those back and play them. And so our experience of playing games was playing games that had ends, right? Didn't have user generated content, didn't have live service stuff, right? And so the habits that
was
we
a
developed
variety.
playing games was about
You
variety.
forced-
It was about you get the next thing, you try all these like variations of games, but you're seeing things made by different people. You're learning aspects of like, you're learning sort of a design language of like how do games work. It's like people who love Zelda games will tell you, like if they play a lot of them, that like, yeah, all Zelda games like actually have extreme similarity in the logic of them, right? Like kind of how the designs work, how you interact with the world, that kind of stuff, even though they look very different from each other. And that is similar to, you know, other games in adjacent genres, but it's not the same. Like each one has their own, each one's got their own thing going on. And you learn that stuff if you are exposed to lots of complete, like fully made games, right? And the kids are just like, Roblox is their first game. It's where all their friends are. And there's infinite game-like things inside of it. And so that's their entire, like, they're not coming online being like, yeah, I'm becoming a gamer and like learning about video games as a kind of media, right? And they're not learning to love video games. They're learning to love Roblox.
Yeah, and it's like I think it's like that's the dream scenario for like, you know, for basically more of the suits type at one of these companies, right? Which is like you get to just like fully own a person's
After a whole generation, you know?
Yeah, like all of their time doesn't go into other things. It's like, what can I do within, you know, Roblox or within Fortnite or whatever else? And the problem is like there's, you know, so back to the point about Sony and like how this is shaped out. It's like any company coming after is seeing that and trying to do that, but you can't actually compete against that. And so the issue is that you do end up exactly in the scenario that you're talking about, where it's like you're throwing billions and billions of dollars at projects that are, but in many ways, far more guaranteed to like fail and not make an ROI than frankly most of like the, you know, higher power indie like projects that get greenlit. Well, oftentimes they'll at least make their money back. You know, maybe not much more.
They're a
than
lot
that,
more cost effective, right? Yeah.
Yeah, more cost effective. Exactly. You could.
Yeah,
You know,
the
for that
ceiling
much
is
money,
lower on like a really good indie title in terms of how much money it can
100%.
possibly make, right? And ultimately, that's what when you're at a company with $1 trillion market cap, right? Like, if they could make $100 million on a $10 million investment, they're like, but we could instead spend that $10 million somewhere that might make $1 billion, right? And so like that's where the money goes, instead, which right now means all into AI stuff, right? But so the like the amount that seems inconceivably huge to us, and it's like obviously you would make so much money if you just like funded good stuff cheaply, right? They're like, yeah, but we only make tens of millions of dollars doing that, and so but the rounding error.
Yeah, what's the point?
So we got to go for the big stuff.
Might as well be
I think
zero.
a fun kind of
you know?
a fun like mental exercise related to this is to think through all like the most famous, most successful financially games, and then ask like how many of those that level of success was what people thought was going to happen, right?
Yeah.
It's almost none of them. Almost none of them.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Like each one, like, you know, Fortnite is the huge one, right? Is like that's again.
Yeah. Fortnite failed before that, right?
It failed and then succeeded because they kind of like messed around with it, and it just turned out to be successful once they came across a new formula, right? But they weren't expecting that. They were just trying to save it so it wasn't a full loss, right?
And they had all the parts. They were like, maybe if we just rearrange stuff a bit, you know, then we can make it work.
Yeah, and then you got like the big MOBAs, right? And those started off as mods.
Yep.
You know, like
Yeah, so the idea that you can like sit down and like plan this in a boardroom, be like, we're going to make $1 billion with this title.
You can't. Yeah.
There's a lot of comedy about that, and the problem is that it produces so much waste. Where it's like you could probably have a better shot at funding, you know, like a few dozen projects that each have a much smaller total, like a tighter budget, and a much more pointed, interesting take. If you're trying to do something like that, like the truth is, if you want to own a whole niche, like I mean, not even a niche, I guess, but like own a whole space, right? In the case of one of these giant games, you simply cannot try to compete directly against them. It's just not gonna pan out, you know.
I think this is part of the problem with like the current sort of funding phase we're in, where the middle has been fully squeezed out.
Yes.
Is kind of where this is, right? Because I think back when we first started too, there were a lot more kind of indie publishing houses that like had a bunch of money sitting around, not tons, right? But enough that they would fund like 10 small games, right? And if on average those games returned a profit, then that was great. They did it, right? And like these are a publisher that has maybe a dozen employees, right? And a handful of games that each have like a dozen employees or up to maybe 30 or something, right? Like small, everything is really small, and the amount of money that you then need, just like absolutely to support that kind of stuff, isn't that high, and everything is a win, right? Like you make $100,000 here, even $10,000 there as an organization. You're like, hey, yeah, like we're keeping the numbers in the black, right? Like everything's great. And as that money has been sucked into the black holes of mega company, coffers, right? Then that's the only people who have money, and they only care, again, if they can make $100 million, right? And so they've got the money, like they have the resources to fund
your point is it's not coming back.
But they're not going to do it.
Yeah, it's not like I mean, I guess in certain cases it is. Just when you think about like Epic with what they've been doing with all their Fortnite money, but that's like a very weird case of them.
Or what they were doing because they stopped doing that. Yeah.
Right. Trying to do something.
Innersloth is a good example of like you're kind of seeing this in cases where you've got anytime an indie team actually like gets successful enough that they're like, ooh, we think we can kind of spread this around a bit. Where is like Innersloth is a great example because their goal isn't to make infinite money. They already did that relative to their to their scale, right? And now that they've got it, then they're decent people. So like, wouldn't it be cool if we could make sure that other games also got to exist and had a chance? And so they've got this indie fund that I've talked to some devs who are in it, and they're like, yeah, it's the chillest experience. They just funded us a bit. Every once in a while they're like, hey, how's that going? And we're like, pretty good. And they're like, slick. And then that's like the entirety of the relationship.
Well, the thing is like that's the attitude you can have when you're able to make a bunch of small bets as opposed to being like, hey, we bet the whole farm on you. You better not mess this up for us.
Well, I think this is kind of gets to the core of it, which is like, so what the question asker was talking about is Sony canceling 9 live service games. We also have been hearing a lot about like Microsoft just constantly laying people off and shuttering studios. There's been a lot of vertical integration where platforms have bought up game studios, and these platforms are making just billions of dollars from all of the stuff that they're just generally selling. And kind of to you guys' point where like if you're an indie team of 5, 10, 20 people, then your expenses are low enough that you can make a decent amount of money and still be in the black. You don't need $100 million, right? Mm-hmm. But these giant companies that have acquired studios, they do need $100 million to be generated by these studios because, like you're saying, that's $100 million is like a drop in the bucket for them. And if something isn't going to hit that level, then they don't. It's just not worth the hassle. Right.
It's also a function of the scale, and because they're trying to do that, then the scale of everything they're trying to. Because like you take your average like AAA-ish live service game consumes so many resources, human resources, to maintain and build and so on, right? And so if that thing doesn't continue, so because you have your first launch, you got that bet, right? And you kind of try to keep it going. And so all those people that are doing that work, all the infrastructure that you've built, because there's also enormous amounts of IT infrastructure that has to be maintained and developed. You have teams whose whole job is to figure out how do you keep the game updated like on a week by week or month by month basis with new content and like the pipelines for that. If you ever want a wild dive, go dig in it because Riot does a pretty good job.
Yeah, I'd say Riot's got really good examples
having like
of that. And
dev blogs and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you look through like, because you gotta ask yourself the question, they've got like probably 1,000 developers, right? And that means that there's like 1,000 people who can make changes to the game, right? How does that all come together and get integrated in a way that gets tested, in a way that can get delivered, right? To
routinely
players,
enough,
right?
routinely enough
to be a live service title. Yeah,
not easy.
Like that, it's incredibly like difficult isn't even, there's not a word that's big enough, like it's incredibly complicated and difficult. And if you're trying to do that with a bunch of games, you have entire huge teams whose job it is to try to do that. And they don't have the time to like, because no 2 games are the same either, right? So you can't have like,
it's all bespoke.
Oh yeah, we've got our live service team and they handle our 5 live service games, right? You got a team for each. And since companies like, like to treat their employees poorly. They're going to be like, what's the tiniest number of people we can burn out trying to do this, right? And so you've got this like pool of like only the people who can like do the most, right? Who are available to do this kind of work. And if they're on a game that isn't generating a 10x ROI, they're gonna be like, okay, let's take a gamble and move them somewhere else, right? So this is why live service games in particular are so fickle, because they really have to justify their enormous continuous cost
post-launch. Yeah.
And almost none can.
When thinking about it from Sony's perspective, like if they just don't fund games, they'll still get a cut of every microtransaction that happens on their platform, just without the cost and complication of managing those dev teams and
it allows you to
managing
push all
milestones
the
and-
risk. The benefit of like owning the whole platform is that you don't have any risk associated with any given game's launch. Because if it does, great, fantastic for you. If it doesn't, who cares?
You still get money.
And this is Apple's and Google's approach, right? Because Apple and Google both don't have like a first party games sort of concept.
Except for Sneaky Sasquatch. Now,
They do, that's true, right? Yeah,
they
Apple
own
does
Rec-
have one studio.
Apple bought a studio, Rec 7. Yeah.
So extremely, and like everybody does eventually, you know, and because we got funded by Google for Levelhead to do,
But they didn't
launch
acquire
practices,
us.
right? They didn't acquire us, but isn't like there's still like, but for the most part, those companies don't even fund games. Like there's nothing there, you know.
I mean, arcades.
Apple Arcade is an exception where that changed and stuff, right? But but the point being though, that's like you can either say we're going to take these really large gambles and own the entirety, all 100% of the revenue that comes out of it, or you can say I'm not going to gamble at all and just let people come to me and just take 30%, which is an enormous fraction for not having built any of the thing, you know. So that's a pretty good deal if you can. If you can.
But
get yourself-
honestly, as we keep hearing about these platforms acquiring studios, every time it happens, I'm just like, why? Like why?
why?
Why are they doing this? Because they don't need to own a game studio to profit off of that game studio. They can just let that studio take on all the risk and take on all the costs, and they can just shave 30% off the top of everything that studio does. Like, there's no reason for them to be doing this, and I think
this is why so many acquisitions are about taking competitors out of the pool, or about
it's usually about making sure that
obtaining the staff, because then you can take the staff who are capable of doing that stuff and put them on your own projects, right? And like we saw this with like Steam. Steam bought what was that studio they bought? They don't buy that many studios. No, the more recent one, the Firewatch team, right?
Oh, yeah. Camposanto.
Yeah, because they bought them, and then that just got slurped, right? Like, because originally it was presented as like, hey, we're going to buy the studio, and then they can make stuff, but now with, Steam money, right? And then the reality was what always happens is that those people just got absorbed into Steam, and now Steam acquired some great employees who are really good, who are right, because especially because people who like manage to pull off making and launching successful games are really rare. It's a hard thing to pull off. It's a hard thing to do every single bit of, and that's also like having done all that work and taken all that risk and successfully pulled it off. You're like, yeah, that's just a resume, right? And it can be cheaper for these companies just to buy the whole ass company to absorb the people inside of it than to try to like individually poach each person, right? And especially because those people tend to be like, we don't want to work for a big company, like that kind of stuff, right? And so,
but if all my friends can come, then maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Which
is fair.
You get sold. Yeah, it is like you get sold what turns out to always be a lie, right? But you get sold the idea that like, we just move what we're doing over here now, and they'll make sure we're funded and otherwise basically leave us alone. And in the best case scenario, that is true for like a year or two, right? And then it becomes quickly less true. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. We got time for one more question, which comes from Unarka Arldonka. Okay. Unarka Arldonka says, is there any worry that beta testing might actually worsen sales? Just a gut question and not fully thought through, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Love it. I love these.
Okay.
So I guess the easiest response to that is to look at Steam demos. Okay. Yeah. Because you'd think that if there's a demo available for a game and someone might want to play that game, that they would check the demo first, right? Because like, wouldn't it be the case that if you want it, that you would definitely check out and see like full information about it. Most people don't play demos for games that they buy. So there's not like a large risk of cannibalizing like essentially player interest with something like a beta or a demo ahead of time. If that's like the angle of the question. If the angle of the question is slightly different, which is like, can you get the wrong information from a beta that then causes you to make changes to a game?
Absolutely true. Yeah.
That is very true, and that's where just design and game direction comes in to knowing when to ask questions about people's feedback, when to ignore it, when to say we'll look at that sort of like in a post logic context, and like developing that kind of a muscle comes into it. That's where like that expertise comes in, because you get a lot of feedback.
About knowing
from
how
people.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about knowing how to think about the bias side of things, right? To be like, if
Mm-hmm.
who is playing your game relative to the population who's going to buy it at launch, right? So when you do a beta, who does that attract? What kind of people play beta tests, right? Not your average player. What kind of people play
Definitely
demos? Also not your average player, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And as Sam said, a surprisingly tiny. Like I know personally, I never play a demo. If there's a demo available, I'm like,
Well, honestly, most people don't
Neat.
even play the games that they buy. Like
That's
half
also
of
true.
games purchased on Steam never
That's also
get
true.
booted up.
Yep.
yeah, but there's a population of people who, if there's a demo available, will prefer to either just play the demo and that's it, and they basically are playing demos. So they're going to have some game experiences, but do it for free, and then move on to the next thing, right? And then there's a population of people who are risk averse when it comes to spending, or they live in a country where it's just hard to buy games, or they want to try it out so they know if they want to save up for it, right? There's all these like scenarios where somebody would buy the game, but they want to try it out first, right? And but that, again, that's a subset of all of the people who will play it, and you have to be really careful with all these things, figuring out like, what does it mean that this happened when this subset of people played it.
I think in general, as a general rule, I think any like early player feedback, early betas and stuff like that, almost always will just improve the game if you have enough people in them, right? I think the problem is that basically
Well, and if you're just good at interpreting feedback, right?
that's basically what it comes down to, right? Yeah, if you make the wrong, because you can make like the wrong changes, because you will have very loud people who are very like about some very specific like piece of your game, and like one of the best things is if you just look at any of the games that are incredibly popular and look at the negative reviews, you'll see people who complain about a thing that is essentially what the shape of the game is.
There's like 20,000 negative reviews for Baldur's Gate 3, which largely say, I don't like turn-based games.
Yeah.
Right. And so the problem is like, yeah, if you listen to that cohort, right, and you're like, well, can we make it like less turn-basedy, or like, is there a thing we can do? And it's like, that's just not the shape of it. Yeah. And so I think part of it is understanding that a lot of the negative feedback you're going to get is referring to such a higher level decision that you've already made about the game, which is like what genre it is, what's the shape of it, right? How does it control, like all these things that are not modifiable at that point. Like
it's just what the game is.
Yeah.
Or even if they are, you're just changing it into a new category that some new subset of people are going to.
Yes, exactly. And so you have to know what the thing is that you're trying to build and be able to be sure enough about that.
It's the nail it, whiff it problem.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, did you nail the thing that you were trying to do? Which is a separate question from, will people like this thing? Right.
Yes.
Yeah,
correct.
And I will say there's probably a scenario where having a demo or a beta, like an open beta, as in anybody can opt in.
Yeah, right,
potentially,
that's important. The distinction between like how available is the beta.
Yeah, if you have a closed beta, you have 50 people in there or something like that. That shouldn't do anything. To your
well, now the risk is
so.
what Sam was talking about, which is you take feedback and do the wrong thing.
Yeah, but there's a scenario which is if you have a short game that doesn't have replay value, right? So but this is also true. Just like a lot of times, if people make games that are under 2 hours to beat it, people will play through the entire game on Steam and then refund it.
Yes. Yep.
And they'll be like, it wasn't worth the money. I mean, yes, I did play through the whole game and get the entire experience that was advertised, but now I can just get my money back. So I'm just going to do that. So this kind of reminds me of when, I'm pretty sure it was That Dragon Cancer. There was a lot of disputes between that developer and streamers and YouTubers because
Yes.
that game doesn't have much in the way of gameplay. It's more of a narrative.
It's
that
a very narrative driven.
yeah, it just pulls you through this story. And watching somebody else play the game is very close in experience to playing it yourself. Right. And they felt like people broadcasting the game on Twitch and on YouTube essentially ate into their sales because if you watched it, you don't need to buy it, right?
Yeah, you got the experience you would have gotten, and therefore, if people were interested and had the ability to just go watch it instead, then then it basically was cannibalizing sales is the idea.
Yeah,
which honestly, is probably true. That's probably just a feature of how that works in the modern ecosystem of what games look.
That just goes to say, like, in how games are consumed today, both in terms of like purchased and played, but also consumed via other media like YouTube and Twitch, making a game like that where it's the same every time, it's totally linear, the player just kind of moves through it. You're kind of signing up for that problem. You know what I mean? Like you can't get around that because you don't want to put yourself in a position where you have an adversarial relationship with people streaming your game on Twitch or making videos on YouTube because that should be free marketing for your game. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be cannibalizing sales. So that's just a consequence of what type of game that is.
Yeah, I will say that our intent with like how many dudes, given like the jam experience we had, is to do some period of open development with it. Right, we're just pushing these web builds live and stuff like that for a while before sort of like shifting away from having everything be public and essentially moving to like a 1.0 or like 0.5, whatever the heck the version number is for the actual Steam release. And so I'm really curious to see how that. I'm really excited about that because we got to do that with Levelhead being out in the open in early access for like a whole year. And it was very fun. Figuring out when exactly to play stuff.
It's so fun to let people play the thing you're working on and talk to you about it, be excited about it. And even sometimes when they're mad about something, that can still be fun as long as they're not too big.
It's instant feedback. Yeah. It's better to add something to the game, which took a week, and then you get feedback immediately, and then the next week you can change it. Versus spend building it in a cave over a year, and then people are like, I hate this, and you're like, well, I wish I would have known that a year ago.
A while ago. Yeah, exactly. And it lets you work on those top level things that are going to be the biggest drivers of like people being into the game or not early and get feedback on those early when the project's more bare bones rather than like building so much stuff on top of those and then being like, nobody even wanted this. Nobody even wanted this whole cake. I made a whole cake and nobody wants this particular flavor of cake. What was the point? Yeah. So I'm really excited to see what that kind of feels like. And the biggest risk there is largely the fact that if you're doing that out in the open stuff, you don't have as much of a like announcement effect of necessarily, right? Of like now people can play it.
Yeah, that's the part of the entertainment industry, because it's true for the entire entertainment industry, that I hate the most. It's part of why I love software so much. Is like software, like the question is it useful? And if the answer is yes, then you can year over year keep selling more of it. Right? Mm-hmm. And people will get it because it's useful. With games, it's like, have I heard of it before? And if the answer is yes, you're like, no thanks, right? And so everything boils down to that one moment where you get it out. But I don't think that has to be true. It's just that
it doesn't have to be true,
right? Yeah, but everything around how games work and how the stores work, right? Because also the stores are built around the game is out now. Like so this Steam's featuring algorithm, right? It's like they have, as it's coming close to its release date, then it goes to the releasing soon queue, and like that, and that also is shown to people, right? And then it releases, and now there's an opportunity for featuring because it got released, and all like everything is oriented around. You've got a launch date, and that's when everything matters. That said, though, I think Steam in particular, because they've shifted so heavily over the years to being like, we do sales and events, and that's actually what drives like all of our long tail revenue for the store, for all the games that are in it, and so on. Then I think that is becoming significantly less true. And on mobile, nobody knows you launched your game, so like,
yes, correct.
I think that just isn't true. Period. Anyway, and so I think it is, and what I'm hoping turns out to be true as we kind of explore this new way of approaching things, is that we can find a way to make it so that we can kind of just talk about what we're doing. We can do experiments, we can do betas, we can do demos, and we can kind of develop in the open and not be so dependent on, oh shit, we got to make sure we don't talk about this and line everything up perfectly. So
when the game
exact moment on this day. Yeah.
Yeah, when the game is smaller and costs less and the stakes are lower, not everything has to be a huge deal. You know, it's not like we got to keep this thing under wraps for 2 years and then like put together the perfect trailer and reveal it. It's like if we're going to spend 3 months working on it or 4 months or whatever the case may be, then we can just have open development most of the time. We can have we routinely updated playable web builds for the first half of development even. And then at some point basically just kind of lock that in, treat that as a demo, and then, finish the game off and then launch the thing. I mean, that's kind of the dream, it's like for it to be fun for us to make the game and be able to engage with the community about the game while we're making it, instead of just being like, oh my God, we can't say anything. Don't say anything to anybody about anything. Cause that sucked so much in the past. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode. We'd like to thank our producers, Fat Bart and Sampa DaCosta, for putting the podcast together, and thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, you can just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the Discord, a way for you to donate, and links to the podcast archives. And if you haven't yet, head on over to Steam, Google Play, and the App Store. Pick up copies of Crashlands 2. If you've been playing it, leave a review. And also, go to How Many Dudes on Steam and give that bad boy a wish list.
Yeah.
We'd appreciate that.
And if you've been listening to this podcast over the years in your ear holes, go check out our YouTube, because this episode, I mean, you already listened to it, so you probably don't want to watch it again. But future episodes, at least for the foreseeable future while we're doing this experiment, will be in video form. So if you go to youtube.com/@bscotch, at as in the sign, then you can subscribe to our page, and you can see when new podcast videos come out, and you can watch them that way.
Yeah. So we're biasing hard toward YouTube now, because it's just a good platform for this. So
a shot. Hop into the Discord. Tell us what you think.
Yep. We appreciate it. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.